Good evening. This is Deacon Joseph Swaden. No, it's not. It's Father Joseph Swaden. I'm so used to using that on my radio voice. It's a problem. We had we had some ideas planned for today, and then all of a sudden this dropped in my lap. Apparently, it was published probably a little under a day ago. And it is a letter that is making the rounds on Twitter, so it's totally relevant right now and totally happening right now. It's a letter from the Archbishop of Chicago's ROCOR-MP diocese, Archbishop Peter. It has a lot of stuff to say, so we're going to go through. The letter. It's divided into a series of points, and we're going to tackle them one by one. And so, I will say this, Bishop Enoch probably will not make it tonight. He had some internet issues. It is a problem. This is a live Q&A. I'm going to get the link. Give me just a moment so anyone can call in. Give me just a moment here while I try to do that. And I will set up a link here so that we have open discussion on this incredibly relevant topic. Give me just one moment, please, while I get that. Okay, there we go. I'll put this here, copy, and I just have to wait for this other chat box to open up. And that's done there, and so, hold on, almost done here. Let's type in, okay, and pin. All right, so as always, if you want to call in and you want to join in on the question, you're free to do so. Just click on the link in the blue box on chat, and we're going to get started real quick. As I mentioned, there is a letter that is making the rounds within the past 24 hours right now, and I'm sure a lot of people are here for the Father Peter Heers question, which is point number 4. But the other ones are worth listening to as well. So let's take a look and see if we can get that up there. Okay, here we go. Pulling this, it's a copy I'm pulling from my on my Gab account. Okay, so it starts with the greeting. Dear Fathers, it's been some time since I wrote you an instructional letter, but it is, as a hierarch's duty to teach, I feel it is important to do this on some regular basis. So I would like to call to your attention the following issues. Issue number 1. He says, it's extremely important that you present candidates for ordination who do not have canonical impediments. It is exclusively the bishop's duty to exercise economy or strictness in following the canons regarding ordination. Therefore, it's not impossible for someone with a canonical impediment to be ordained, but the bishop must understand fully the situation to be able to decide to abrogate the canons in this regard or not. We've updated the data collection for that we use for this purpose, and I have attached it here. It's not attached in this copy. There are 2 issues that seem to continually cause problems. The first is marriage. Marriage is not a sin. Baptism does not unmarry those who have been married before. If a candidate or spouse was married to someone else before his or her baptism, that is an impediment to ordination. The second is time is in the church before. The second is time in the church before ordination. St. Paul writes to Timothy, lay hands quickly on no man. Candidates for readers should have proven themselves consistent churchgoers and zealous helpers of the parish for not less than 3 years. All other candidates for not less than 7 years. Again, exceptions could be made, but I need to understand the need for such fully to make the best decision in this regard. A hierarch will answer to God principally before those whom he ordains, and I ask you to help give me the best answer to the Lord when I appear before him. And then it goes into comments by St. Gregory the Great to Bishop Januarius. So we're going to start here because I, like all of you, heard the Father Peter Heers thing. I did not read the rest of the letter until probably about 2 or 3 hours ago, and I was like, wait a second, there's a lot more wrong here. Okay, the first issue here is he's basically saying church marriage as a whole is kind of irrelevant, and I'm going to explain why. In many cases, historically, even with the true Orthodox, one of the things that in Greece, one of the things that the new calendars immediately did was to declare their baptisms and marriages invalid. What this is basically saying is it doesn't matter what kind of marriage you had. You could have had a state marriage. It's not relevant. And that's not the way the church has ever properly operated. So that was one that I thought was really odd. The other one is I got this weird impression that it seems almost like he doesn't really know the candidates he's ordaining. That struck me as a little bit odd. Let me see if I can make this bigger. And then just okay, let's see. But so that those two issues right there are kind of a shock to me. Give me just one moment. Hold on, adding. Okay. And so I'm just gonna put that there. So I'm kind of amazed, to be honest. I'm actually kind of shocked because that seems to imply that it doesn't really. I mean, the church. If it's just mind blowing. It's basically we're going to accept your pre-Orthodox marriage, your Christian marriage, Roman Catholic, but then what about your state marriage? What about your cohabitation? What about a common law marriage? I mean, none of these would qualify as a proper celebration of the marriage in the church. It's just a mind-blowing thing. But my guess is that he's probably encountered a few of these. But the real shocker here is that, again, people don't, it doesn't seem like he knows the people he's ordaining, which is really surprising. Okay, Aren jumps on. Hey there, Aren. Did you have a question, or are you just popping on?
Just hopping on, Father.
Okay. If you have a question, just let me know, okay?
I will once we get done with this. This letter's interesting.
This letter's crazy. All right. Well, I'm gonna keep you in. I'm gonna put you in the side there, and then if you have a question, just write me in the chat, okay?
Will do.
All right. Okay, so let's continue on. This is already interesting, and let's get to the next point. Names at baptism. If someone comes to the church with a perfectly Orthodox name, there's no reason to change that name at baptism. Not only is there no reason, but you should not change one's name without my specific blessing. If the Lord inspired the parents of the new Christian to give him or her a Christian name, it seems presumptuous to me to change that name. The use of exotic names for those who do not come with Christian names should be avoided as well. It is best if the new Christian can know his or her saint. This is greatly helped if there is a service for that saint that is served annually, and if there is a life of the saint written. Our desire is not to exemplify exoticism, but to shepherd as best we can the greatest number of the faithful into the heavenly kingdom. If we convey first and foremost that we are exotic, this will not be attractive to serious people considering the true faith, and will attract those who are often unstable. Western saints are, of course, acceptable, but this may cause some conflict if a person travels to a traditionally Orthodox country or even visits another parish, and the priest should send those in this situation with a letter explaining that they're in good standing and that their name is of a Western Orthodox saint. Okay, my comments, I actually agreed with Archbishop Peter until he literally put it down on paper and said this is a rule, because it's not a rule. The church has always had a history of some people keeping their names on coming from heresy and some people changing their names on coming from other religions. That's just been the rule. So he's made this now a rule, and so it's a weird rule, and it's really weird that everybody who's getting baptized has to ask for his specific permission. Okay, so let's get to the third one. Now let me check for questions. Nothing yet. Okay, great. We're moving on. Here's where it starts to get kind of crazy. Number 3, let us return to economy and strictness. Whenever there is any deviation from the canons for pastoral reasons, that decision regarding deviation must be made by the bishop and not the priest. This is why I ask you to seek my blessing when you feel someone should be chrismated rather than baptized, or a second or third marriage seems good to you for the salvation of those involved. Of course, I need you to provide the context for such a deviation from the canons and appreciate your advice in this regard, but the decision is the bishop's. This is all the more the case regarding corrective baptism. This movement cycles through the church on some sort of regular basis and seems to be doing so again today. The 1970s and 1980s saw a resurgence of this movement to correct baptisms or receptions into the church that were done, quote, incorrectly. This decision, whether someone should be baptized once they're already a practicing Orthodox Christian, is fully the purview of the bishop. Priests are not to baptize anyone in such a situation without my express blessing, and a very strong case will need to be made for corrective baptism. This is not something that we can approach lightly. Further, you are not to lobby for corrective baptism among your flock. If someone comes to you asking for such, this is one thing, and you should gather all the information you can in this regard and provide this to me. But to suggest this to someone before speaking to me about it, or to preach or publish in this regard, is strictly forbidden. Our calling as clergymen is to help save souls, not tempt the faithful. If it becomes obvious during your pastoral work among the people that someone was clearly brought into the church incorrectly, then address this question to me. We will decide together if, how, and when, and where to address this to the person in question. None of the sacraments, including baptism, are magical spells that must be completed perfectly in order for the magic to work. We are servants of the Most High God, and His grace is certainly sufficient for us and our salvation, even if for some reason there is some sincere but slightly incorrect practice that brings someone into His church. Yeah. One thing I will notice about the tone is that this is, I hate to say it, it sounds more like a manager to some degree than a bishop. It's like, he's clearly kind of expressing I'm the boss kind of thinking. And I think he's kind of to some degree wrong about the 70s and 80s. But more importantly, it's like he just ignored the 1971 instruction that everyone should be baptized. And he's not taking into account that a lot of people coming in are not, because they weren't received that way. And so with that, let me double check for any questions or comments, and I don't see any. So we'll continue to number 4, the one everyone's been waiting for. Let's be honest, this is the one everyone's been waiting for. I will now address my concern with the person who seems to be most responsible for the resurgence of the corrective baptism movement in our days, Father Peter Heers. He has published a new book on baptism that's causing major problems in all of the English-speaking Orthodox world. These concerns about Father Peter are shared by me, our Metropolitan, other ROCOR bishops, and bishops outside the ROCOR. First, it has come to my attention that Father Peter has been sneaking around our diocese, holding assemblies for the faithful, and instructing them not to tell their local priests about these gatherings. Wow, he's so sneaky. As the Lord instructed us, wherefore by their fruits ye shall know them. This behavior is completely inappropriate and, in my opinion, poisons anything that Father Heers says or does. I have addressed Father Heers' bishop, Metropolitan Seraphim of Piraeus, to protest this behavior. At least this seems to be his bishop. Practically speaking, he seems to have no bishop and no flock. But at least one point, he was under Metropolitan Seraphim, and I trust the Metropolitan will know where to send my letter if he is not the correct recipient. Second, the reaction to Father Heers' book has been for priests to take upon themselves the strictly hierarchical duty of exercising economy versus strictness. I have addressed this above, so there's not need to address it again here. Third, by not recognizing that the hierarchs have the exclusive ability and responsibility to exercise economy versus strictness, Father Heers teaches that there is, in fact, no true church. That is, if the hierarchs do not possess the rights of the apostles, then apostolic succession is not present in the Orthodox Church, and there is no grace in the Orthodox Church, and it is not the true church. And if the Orthodox Church is not the true church, then surely there is no true church. And we descend into the Protestant fantasy of the branch theory of ecclesiology. Fourth, by essentially insisting that the canons are self-actualizing magical spells, Father Heers misunderstands the canons must always be applied first with love and with the care for the salvation of those who have broken the canons. A Protestant approach to the canons, interpreting them personally rather than according to the tradition of the church, is just as spiritually harmful as reading the scriptures in this way. The church desires the salvation of man, not his unmerciful correction and punishment to satisfy divine justice that man has broken God's cold-hearted law. I call upon our priests to reread Metropolitan Anthony Krapovitsky Confession and follow his Holy Father's advice regarding confession, penance, and other issues surrounding the sacrament of repentance. Fifth, by insisting that reception of converts to Orthodox Christianity can only be done by baptism, Father Heers misunderstands God's grace and essentially treats it as a created object. God's grace works in accordance with the church, not in accordance with Father Heers' opinions. Baptism is the standard mode of reception into the church, but already in the 4th century, St. Basil the Great outlines other modes of reception of converts, depending on the spiritual situation from which they come into the church. That is, one must take into consideration the spiritual reality of the convert, as well as the pastoral reality of the convert, before discussing with one's hierarch the mode of reception. Over time, when a priest learns when a deviation from the standard of baptism may be canonically permissible and pastorally advisable, and discusses this with his bishop as needed. I do not bless the selling or distribution of the book on the reception of the heterodox into the Orthodox Church in our mid-American diocese. Okay, let me check see if there's no questions yet. Okay, so let me see if Aren wants to jump on. Aren, I don't know. Is that the part you were waiting for? Oh, I think he might have walked away. Okay. Well, anyway.
Sorry, it helps if I actually turn my mic back on.
Okay. Was that the part you were waiting for? Section 4. It seems to be the big one that's causing all the hoo-ha.
I mean, the whole thing's insane.
It is. But this is. I pointed this out when I wrote that on my cab that he's setting up whether people want to realize this or not, and this is going to be the biggest problem, is that people do not realize what, unless you're looking at the canons. And I do have I actually have the rudder up, so I'm going to just bring that up to kind of bring up what's happening, because if we look at what he's saying in part 4, when he says he's been sneaking around the diocese holding assemblies for the faithful and instructing them not to tell their local priests around these gatherings, he's basically, and he says our diocese, he is assigning a locality, and and there's a purpose to that. And I'm going to switch the tab over so that you can see what that purpose is.
I mean, that gets into a whole other issue of America is just a complete and utter mess when it comes to dioceses in general.
Yeah, it is. Give me a moment, and there we go. So let me share this. Okay, so if we go to Canon 31 of the Sixth Ecumenical Council, and it's copied in the First, Second Synod as well, it says, as for those clergymen who hold the liturgy in oratories or prayer houses or in private residence, who carry out a baptism therein, without having obtained the consent of the local bishop to do this, we decree that if any clergyman fail to guard against doing this, let him be deposed. The interpretation of St. Nicodemus and the Concord make this very clear. That's exactly, because what that's doing is effectively, if you are doing this in the diocese of a putative bishop, you are effectively creating a parasynagogue. And so that is kind of the underlying motivation. I'm going to switch back to the letter so we can finish that up. But yeah, this is by far, it doesn't get any worse than this. And I'm talking about for Father Peter, because effectively what Archbishop Peter has done here is he's noting the location. He's noting it is his responsibility. So even Father Peter, if assuming that he does have a bishop who doesn't want to say which bishop he's under in ROCOR, it could be Archbishop Luke, etc., he's going to have to speak up now. And while Father Peter, I guess through Orthodox ethos, did deny this happened on Twitter, that's a serious accusation, and it's one for grounds for deposition. If Father Peter is claiming to be under ROCOR, and a ROCOR bishop is now saying that he's breaking the canons by conducting these assemblies illegally, effectively he's setting him up for a canonical trial. There's not, and it can probably even be held in absentia. So the point is, he'd still have to reach out to the priest. They'd have to send him. You have to send canonical letters twice, attempting to notify him of the trial, so he shows up. But it does not look good, and that's the canonical way to do it. It's not actually the practical way a lot of these dioceses do in World Orthodoxy. It's more common that they'll just assign it to a registrar and they'll rubber stamp it, and then they'll list him as deposed. So this is actually really, really bad if you are Father Peter in ROCOR-MP. It's probably it's the closest thing to a threat of deposition we can get to.
Yep.
Your thoughts?
what do you think he's actually referring to when he says that Father Peter is running around holding assemblies? Do you think he's trying to insinuate that he's holding liturgies, or that he's doing stuff like the Orthodox Montanica, and that's what he's upset about?
I have no idea. That's the honest truth.
Because I mean
Was
that
he at
matters
the
a lot.
Orthodox Montanica?
Yeah, he was him and I
Is
think
that in his
Father
diocese?
John. That I have no idea.
Okay,
But
well, I'm
there
gonna.
was
Well,
several
is it?
different things like that he's
Yeah.
done.
Well, now is the Montanica in Montana?
Yes, it is.
Okay, then it might be in his area because it's Diocese of Chicago and the Midwest. So that very well could be his diocesan boundaries. Now, granted, if it was just him talking at this Orthodox Montanica thingy, that's not enough. That won't hit the canonical standard in a proper trial. But as I said, they may not have to have a proper trial because a lot of these dioceses will have this like diocesan dicastery that does they rubber stamp it, the bishops rubber stamp it, no one pays attention, and there's no charges. It's not done properly. This does actually happen. So if he's gonna get deposed because he made a speech at some Montanica thing, well, no,
Yeah.
that's not that doesn't qualify. That would be an illegal deposition if he does that.
I forget
You
which.
know,
It's one of the Orthodox YouTubers hosts it. I forget which one.
because a proper thing when it's a priest, a proper trial requires 6 bishops. Now, granted, he seems to be implying he has the support of at least 6 bishops because he's implying he has the support of the Metropolitan and other bishops in the ROCOR Synod. I'm guessing he doesn't. May not be the whole synod, but it may be a part of the synod. Now, people have been pointing out, and as I mentioned, this stuff is crazy on Twitter today, and it's
I bet. I bet
it
Twitter's been
real.
fun.
Oh, you won't. You have no idea. It's been fun for me, but only because of the fact that I get to talk about true orthodoxy a bunch. But excuse me. So basically, the this kind of thing, like it's already appeared on like the liberals. The Fordham liberals are cheering. All the the communists, etc. They're all like, "Yay, we're rid of Father Peter." I am trying to be nice and say, maybe you should consider true orthodoxy. I deeply hope that when he did his, YouTube with Archbishop Luke, that maybe Archbishop Luke might have thrown in a good word for, like, say, the GOCK or something, just to give him an idea, because they're going to aim for a deposition. And if all he did was the Orthodox Montanica thing, it would be an illegal deposition, but I don't think there's a right of appeal in the current structure in ROCOR-MP. So that would be a problem. That would be a big problem.
I don't know. I remember some of his comments in the past when I was watching his content. Some of the stuff he made about the true Orthodox was not very nice. So I don't know. I hope he's changed his mind.
The problem is this. It's one thing that is important, and this is part of the reason why people are kind of misunderstanding the fight that's going on. Some have brought up COVID. And that's valid. He is very much against COVID, and of course, Archbishop Peter was a big COVID guy. But also, the baptism issue is making him persona non grata among most of world Orthodoxy in the U.S., and we have to explain why. Again, I really wish I could find the document. Somebody's got to find this, but back when it was called SCOBA, before it was called the Assembly of Canonical Orthodox Bishops, they had guidelines. And these guidelines were written in the spirit of ecumenism. They were written in the spirit of, we're going to try to reach out more to different, these different churches, and we're going to recognize the baptisms of the Roman Catholic Church, and we're going to recognize the baptisms of, I believe it's like the mainline Lutheran and Episcopalian churches, etc. And so if you were a former member of these groups, you were absolutely, period, had to be received by chrismation. That was it. There was no question. And if you were Roman Catholic, you could also often be received by confession. So the point is, these kind of ecumenical mindset type things made it into official documents. And so they weren't economia. And this is one of the big problems, is that when people said, oh, no, we're doing it by economia, that's a smoke screen. That's what they were saying. But what they were really thinking, and what Father Peter is discovering, as I've noticed in a few more recent videos, is that He's talking to, what he refers to as brother clergy, who are saying, well, we recognize their sacraments. Well, that's a whole different thing than economia. That's recognition. And so if you're recognizing the mysteries of the Roman Catholic Church and various Protestant churches as real baptisms that the grace of the Holy Spirit descends upon, there's a serious problem.
Well,
not
you get
for
the
us.
branch theory at that point.
Yeah, it's just, that is exactly what ecumenism is. It's pure branch theory. And so that is the real reason that Father Peter's book is making so many people upset. To a ROCOR person, like he was on with Father John yesterday, Father John Whiteford, the book probably seemed completely unoffensive to even Craig Trulio, who did a study on it. He was like, there's not really anything wrong with it historically, because there isn't. The reason that these people are mad, and the reason why people call him Heers and they go off on him very simply, is because they don't believe it was economia. They believe in the heterodox baptisms. And so the point is, they're going to do whatever they can to literally destroy this man for writing what in ROCOR would be, until Archbishop Peter apparently, a pretty standard text on baptism. So
I'm
that's
kind of surprised ROCOR of all the things is having this kind of reation. I was expecting this from the Greek Church.
It's a shock. It's a shock effect. I can't believe what I'm seeing. And the thing is, I mean, if it was just going to the Montanica thing, that's one thing. I have heard of people doing some organization to some degree, and I'm not going to confirm any of what I know, simply because I'm not going to provide any ammunition for what I think is a pretty good priest in World Orthodoxy trying to do a decent job for people. But more importantly, all I can say is, if they have discovered that there is some sort of developing body or developing grouping within World Orthodoxy that is now basically adhering to the proper form and saying, no, we're not going to do this, you're going to run into a problem. It comes back down to hierarchical support. If the hierarchs don't support you, and in this case, they really, really don't, then you're going to be backed up against the wall, which is why to me, it would seem that going true Orthodox would be the option. But if he's really that hostile, I feel bad. I mean, it doesn't affect me. People can start out hostile to something and then realize it's the truth later. Look at St. Paul. But the point is, so there's problems with this, to say the least.
I hope he's changed his position. I really do, because that would be so funny.
It would be wonderful. Actually, it would be a joy. I mean, he'd be getting. I would say that he would probably get, torn up and attacked and persecuted, but that's already happening, so it's not like that would change.
It's nothing new to him. I mean,
exactly. So, so let me see here. So I'm going to finish off this letter, and I'll bring you back, and we'll have some more discussion. And if anyone wants to call in, please feel free. Just click on the link at the top of the chat box. And okay, let's continue with the letter. Okay. Next page. Number 5. It is understood that priests will be present in the online world. Our parishioners spend inordinate amounts of time there, which I would like you to try to moderate, if at all, through your sermons and good personal example. And thus the clergy will be there to instruct the faithful as well. However, I ask you to please discuss with your dean or with me any plans to be interviewed or to otherwise act online outside your parish context. As your bishop, I should be aware of everything that is happening in the diocese. Of course, in a diocese as huge as ours, that is not really possible. But any deviations from the norm should come to my attention. It is not good if I look at the internet and am surprised by pictures or articles or videos I see there. And frankly, this happens all too often. Number 6. I'm not going to touch. I'm going to comment on it after. But number 6, I encourage you to inquire of your dean or me if you have liturgical or theological questions. I encourage our new clergymen to attend the annual liturgical practicum sponsored by our pastoral school. It could seem, looking at the internet, like the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia has thrown away its traditional practices following the signing of the Act of Canonical Communion in 2007 but that is not the case in our diocese. As long as I am the ruling hierarch, we will follow these time-tested Russian Orthodox practices. After the revolution, the church developed differently in the Soviet Union than it did abroad. Frankly speaking, the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia strove continually to preserve the pre-revolutionary practices of the Russian Church. Our tradition is authentic. Moscow's traditions are also authentic, for despite the hardships the church faced during those times of persecution, the Holy Spirit led the church. But their practices are authentic for them, while our practices are authentic for us. With my archiepiscopal blessings and love of Christ, our Archbishop Peter of Chicago and Mid-America. So, let me see here, and we're going to see what's going on. And give me a moment here. Oh, wow. Okay, there's been a lot of comments that are not popping up in StreamYard. Give me a moment. I apologize if I'm missing comments here. But yeah, let me, I'm going to put some up here. We're going to see here, because it looks like after the hello from D.E. Conley, all the comments are just not there, which is weird. Let me see here. Now, let me see. Who would win in a cage fight, Peter of Chicago or Luke of Jordanville? I have no idea, and that was strange. Father John Whiteford says, any marriage, regardless of whether it is in the church or not, is an impediment if the total marriages add up to church 2 or more. I would love to disagree with you publicly on that, because you have to have a recognized marriage. Otherwise, it's not a marriage. It's cohabitation. We've actually had this discussion. I've had this discussion many, many times. It affects me personally. But
you've had that discussion with me.
Yeah, and the point is, if the church does not recognize all marriages, it is impossible to just use the universal, the church recognizes all marriages. It's false. It's proven by the exception. Holy Transfiguration, even the tone of the letter is bad. Hierarchy trying to assert more centralized control. The EP and Francis preparing for top-down BlackRock-style management. Enjoy the mess. I really do apologize. These comments are not showing up in StreamYard, which means I can't put them up. Maybe if no, that didn't do it. Maybe if I take the banner off, it'll do it. I don't know. No, I'm just gonna have to read them off. South Padre Sony says, nice to see you, Father John Whiteford. American monarchist, message retracted. And Father Tony agreed. Father Antonio said, American monarchist, how does True Orthodox feel about Western Rite? I am catechumen in the Antiochian Archdiocese in Midwest and have my suspicion about Western Rite. The overwhelming majority of True Orthodox do not recognize the Western Rite. There is no such thing as groups of Western Rite Old Calendarists. There is only one jurisdiction in the True Orthodox churches that uses the Western Rite. It is mine. That's it. The Metropolia. There's no other ones. Thomas Comerford. This is honestly so fascinating to watch unfold. This is why movies are dumb. Real life is much bigger and cooler. Okay, yeah, I can agree with that. Thomistic Monster says, hey, y'all. Holy Transfiguration. Western Rite is in Britain pretty poor. Americans seem to do it better. Well, our Western Rite in Scotland is not bad. But let me see here. South Padre American monarchists. It depends. There isn't a universally held opinion. However, the Metropolia uses priests in Western Rite services. Correct. Wazda. Good evening. Good evening. And then he said, I give it at least a 30% chance that he goes TO. And then American Monarchist says it would be based if Father Peter went TO. And American Monarchist says, are GOC and TO the same thing? Yes, they are. Mazda says, I think Father Peter would go back to Greece under Metropolitan Seraphim before joining the GOCK. And South Padre Tony says, essentially interchangeable, yes. Mazda says, but I hope Father Peter becomes TO. And so D. Conley 1 says, so that 0.5 is directed at Father John Whiteford for sure. I'm going to review 0.5 because I did not realize that anyone would take a shot at Father John Whiteford. What does it say?
Priest being online.
Oh, come on. He's not as online as a lot of other people. That's ridiculous. I think he shows up like once a month on something.
I would think that would be more at a shot at Josiah Trenum, Father.
Yeah,
Josiah than anything
if you're doing YouTube shorts, not like I'm doing YouTube shorts or anything, but if you're doing YouTube shorts, that's a lot of time on the internet. I personally do not necessarily think that is a bad thing. I don't think my bishop thinks that's a bad thing, and I don't think his vicar bishop thinks that's a bad thing, or he wouldn't be my co-host on this show. So no,
it has to be harvested.
Yeah, it's just public discourse. That's all it is. It's what it comes down to. And people may like that, people may not, but that's the reality. Now, I think what's happening is a lot of people don't like the kind of what's the word? The uncontrollable nature of the internet. And so if you think you have something under control, then somebody turns on you, then it doesn't seem like you're in control anymore. Unfortunately, online betrayal is something that comes with the internet. That's just a given. The fact that the OCA loved the internet until Jay Dyer left the OCA and a bunch of his fans said we're not going to the OCA doesn't mean that, oh, they're on the internet too much. Well, why did they leave? Is it just because Jay Dyer is a cult leader, or is it because they're ecumenists? It's a hard question. No, not really. We know they're ecumenists. Are they in a cult is a whole different question. The whole point is that online does not automatically mean that you're in a cult or that you're a Protestant or that it's silly. It's silly. For the number of people who have come in to the church based on what they read on the internet, they should use that time for self-reflection. And if Archbishop Peter thinks this way, maybe he should too. And then let me see here. So they'll come for the best priest soon. Yes, they will. What traditions is he referring to in point 6? I have no idea. There's doesn't seem to be very much. What I think he's referring to is that there are certain pre-revolutionary customs and traditions that ROCOR has preserved that Moscow threw away and kind of replaced with really not great stuff. Like there's been talk about like the singing, for example. For some reason, the deacons, like I don't think I could actually pass in a Moscow Patriarchate choir as a deacon because the deacons are trained to have this weird bass voice for some reason. So they're supposed to sound like, whoa, whoa. And it's like, there's no logical reason for it, but they actually have training classes in the seminaries to have future deacons use the best of their bass voice. I don't get it. And I think some of the quote unquote Moscow Patriarchate traditions are, just holdovers from the Soviet period. And then he gave the interview that was 3 hours. Maybe it's if it is a reference to Father John, you're welcome to join the True Orthodox too, and we can argue about marriage some more. Didn't Father Seraphim Rose in St. Philaret, New York, work with the GOC? It seems like they had many interactions with the GOC. That is absolutely correct. They did. This is amazing. I wish I could put these up on the screen, and unfortunately, it looks like maybe StreamYard can't handle this many comments. I have no idea why it's not letting me, but I'm going to keep reading them, so don't worry. And then let me see here. And then I think also the TOs who run this channel had a live stream. I'm not sure which. If you're referring to us, I mean this is a live stream. We do live streams every week, where they cover True Orthodox saints venerated by World Orthodox. We did have a live stream about that. That is correct. Reader John says ROCOR-MP is at a breaking point. I think the fighting from within will throw in the towel. Unfortunately, that's the choice. It's what it comes down to is, I've said this, I've been saying this since my debate. Ultimately, you have to make a decision. You have to A, stay faithful to tradition, or B, be faithful to your hierarchy. And if your hierarchy tells you to give it up, throw in the towel, and sell out, you have the choices, leave or sell out. That's it. And it's a horrible thing. I feel bad for people involved in it, but it's getting worse. I kind of started seeing the writing on the wall back when the whole thing about Father Peter's reception became an issue, but I'm watching it accelerate in real time. Let me see here. And the problem is that anti-rebaptism people can not only point to Philaret of Moscow holding to grace in foreign churches, as well as other Russians venerated from the 19th, but also that's not exactly a great argument. One, because the reason for the switch back in ROCOR in 1971 is not because they were trying to break from the customs of, say, Metropolitan Philaret of Moscow, but because of the fact that the actual forms of baptism had changed so much they had become foreign. In other words, the strictness that accompanied the traditions of baptism were not there. So, and plus, on top of that, a lot of the people that were being received at the time of Metropolitan Philaret, St. Philaret of Moscow, were Poles, Ukrainians, Uniates, people who were actually doing something very similar to an Orthodox form of baptism. That's simply not a comparison to what the Vatican II modern Roman Rite is, or what I mean. I don't need to tell anyone about horror story baptisms in Protestantism. A lot of people already know. Opinion on the 1925 cross apparition and implications. I assume you're talking about the cross over the sky in Athens. It landed on the right day, and it's a miracle. That's the implications are that was the right day. So people who aren't doing it on the right day, because it was the Feast of the Exaltation of the Holy Cross, which is a movable feast, they really should be doing it on the right day. That it's a Feast of the Cross. The cross appears the right day on the church calendar, and if you're not on the church calendar, you're not doing it right. It's that simple. And then somebody says you can't compete with big money interests in world orthodoxy. No, I don't know. It's you're to some degree you're right. Yeah, to some degree you're right, but not necessarily. American monarchy, that's what is World Orthodox. That's part of your funny World Orthodox. Yeah, okay. So the point is, yes and no. And I say this because what's happening here, and this is a paradigm shift. I'm going to use Romania as the best example. Although I must say, if you haven't seen the new Ready to Harvest video about the growth of Orthodoxy, he does mention true Orthodoxy as a footnote, but he does mention the issues that are facing the growth of Orthodoxy in America. And it's a really good video. But
He's
the point
really
is,
good in general, by the way.
Yeah, and the point is that what happens over time is it's a paradigm shift. As people begin to, because these big money interests in world orthodoxy that want to make it fail, or shall I say, be like an ecumenist failure, sure, they are currently, I would say, ascendant. And the point is that what happens is, over time, as people flee heretical churches, the non-heretical churches grow, and then eventually they take over the infrastructure of the dying and continually shrinking churches. This is effectively what's happening in Romania right now, where they started at something like 10% of the population, and now they're 33% of the population. They have more children than the ecumenists do. So what ends up happening? In 2-3 generations, they'll be half the population of the church. What are you going to do with all those empty churches? It's the only thing that can be done is that eventually they will take over that area. Demographics is destiny. American Monarchist said, we had a priest visit to Vespers for a sick priest. He drove in a new Mercedes sports car. Wow. What jurisdiction was that? No, I'm kidding. I don't want to. That's not the way I do. So no, that's terrible. I'm sorry to hear that.
He's probably in my jurisdiction. He's probably Greek.
Oh, okay. Let me see here. Okay, so we're going to look back and see StreamYard still not pulling up anything, which is fine. So yeah, this set kind of Twitter ablaze. And everyone from the Fordham people, they're just jumping on Father Peter. But as we can see, there's, I guess, other problems with this document as well. So let me see here. Sweden is switching for the car, confirmed. Yeah, no, I'm not a Mercedes. Anyway, no. I'm done. Then Elijah Hallberg writes, I'm under the Greeks too. So, yeah, so that's no, that's not happening. The truth of the matter is, if I wanted to sell out, I had many more opportunities to. And I'm not patting myself on the back or anything like that. I just, no. Certainly it wouldn't be for a car. Somebody says, did you start out in World Orthodoxy, then find True Orthodoxy? Complicated question. Okay, let me see if I can. I'm not going to go into my conversion, but I will go into the process of how things went for me, which is why the answer is not really. When I first realized I had to become Orthodox because of the event, I called the closest local Orthodox priest I could find at my college, and it turned out to be a priest of the Moscow Patriarchate. In actual fact, when I arrived and called him and told him about it, went to the service, he actually asked if I wanted to just go and receive communion. That didn't seem right to me, because even though most of the documents I had read were kind of ecumenistic documents, the intro to Orthodoxy and stuff like that, they all said that chrismation was the norm. So I felt really, really confused as to why this guy would say just be received by communion. I was like, no, that doesn't sound right. So, okay. I didn't. So I went and I didn't receive communion. But about 2 weeks later, the priest, I calls me up and he's like, "Oh, I have great news. I'm being received into ROCOR." I'm like, "Okay, that's cool." So I went to the church in St. Petersburg, and I think it was St. Petersburg, Clearwater, one of the two. Big bluish church is what I have vague memories of it. But he was received in where he had to say at the Amvon, he was joining the true church, the Russian church abroad. And so at that point, ROCOR was not in communion with the MP. Is he here? Okay. Before we continue with my story, Father John said, St. Ambrose says that baptisms do not wash away marriages because marriage is not a sin. Obviously, that means marriages outside of the church count. Now, that is an interesting point. I will say that I am not sure of St. Ambrose's context, so I would have to look at it. However, based on the practice of the church of not recognizing marriages, my point stands until we can get a solid, position here. I don't think that we're actually debating whether or not the church chooses not to recognize certain marriages. I think that was always allowed because the church has always done it. And so, in any case, so the point is, I ended up after this going to Miami. And the priest I was talking to, because my mom lived there, that's why. The priest that I was talking to decided that, he was like, well, try to talk to this priest. And I didn't talk to that priest because that priest, I did talk to him, but the priest was further away and was like, what can I do for you? So on and so forth. But there was a church that was ROCOR that was right next to me. So I went to that one. And in that one, the priest told me that I had to be baptized. I said, I thought you were supposed to chrismate converts. He said, no, we baptize people from Roman Catholicism. And so I was like, well, okay, that's what you say I got to do. That's what you say I got to do. And so I went for a 2-year catechumenate. I ended up going to Hackna, not because of any great theological reason, but very practically. I had moved up to the Boston area. There was no church near me. And so I saw the monastery, and then I called up a priest in the ROCOR Boston church who didn't want to help with anything. I'm like, I'm kind of a catechumen. Can you help me? No. Can you direct me where I can get there by train? No. Okay. And finally it got to the point where I was like, well, it sounds like you don't want me to go there. And he's like, well, you have a perfectly good church in St. Mark of Ephesus church, which was an OCA church in Plymouth. And I was like, that's an OCA church. And he's like, yes, it is. And I said, are you suggesting I should go to an OCA church? And he said, I'm not suggesting anything. And he hung up on me. I did try to go to St. Mark's, where the priest made sure to talk about a wedding that was coming up and to make sure that every person from every religion is invited. And I thought, what a weird thing to say. And so I ended up calling the monastery in Boston, and they said, oh, we have a priest right nearby in Harvard. And so I went to there. Got baptized a few months later. It turned out, because I just got, after 2 years, I just got kind of used to sitting around and being a catechumen. So I was like, the priest comes up to me and he's like, so when do you plan to get baptized? I'm like, well, I don't plan it. The church plans it. I just wait. He's like, okay. So he was like, in that case, I'm going to baptize you next month. So I was like, wow, yay. So anyway, that's the story. And ever since then, with the exception of 1 year, I've been in true Orthodox churches. I just had a very weird experience, but there was no real change from World Orthodoxy to True Orthodoxy for me. It was just a priest who moved from the Moscow Patriarchate to ROCOR in a month. And then about 2 months later, when I was in Miami, he became an Anglican and wanted to let me know that, which was weird. Anyway, so the point is, okay, so let's continue. Based if true Orthodox are having more kids, absolutely. That's true about all traditional Orthodox, even in ROCOR. They don't look well on birth control and all this other stuff. It's a very modern thing. D. Connolly writes, an important problem that is coming to light is many clergy and other religions have been intentionally changing the baptismal formula at their own whim. Yeah, that's what I was kind of implying when I mentioned horror stories in Protestantism. I heard one story of a guy who was told by his pastor to go dive for the Lord, and he jumped in. That was the whole baptism. I was like, well, that's different.
And I thought my baptism was strange.
Oh, what happened in yours?
Well, I was a Jehovah's Witness, remember, so I didn't get a
Oh.
Trinitarian baptism.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I have to be baptized, even by World Orthodox standards. They have no choice. I was baptized in the name of the Father, the Son, and Jehovah's Holy Spirit anointed organization.
What? That's a thing?
Yes.
Wow, that's crazy.
And you only get dunked once.
Oh, so you only get a single immersion, I guess. Well, that makes sense because only the Father is God to them. The Son's a creature, and then you're being blessed in the name of the Jehovah's Witnesses. That's bizarre.
The funny part about that is they say that, and then you go change. They bring you to the dunking pool, and then you get dunked about 20 minutes later.
Okay. That's even stranger.
Yes, it is. Wow.
Thomistic Monster says, TLM has way more kids than I have ever seen in Orthodoxy. No idea. But you don't have a pope, which means that nothing's ever going to work for you. And then Holy Transfiguration says, female priest baptizing in the name of the Mother God might do it. I don't even want to think about that.
We're not talking about the Episcopal Church.
Yeah, I don't even want to go there. Oh boy. Wow. So there's a lot that's problematic here, to say the least. And so, yeah. So any thoughts, comments? Feel free to call in if you want. Use the wonderful little, the blue thing. I'm like so burnt out today. It's been a crazy weekend.
I find it insane that a bishop thinks he can say, don't sell a book.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, they have the right to do that. They have the right to ban a book. I'm just surprised it's this book, because this book this book would not be controversial. And Father John, if you're still listening and disagree with me on the marriage thing, that's fine. But would you agree that book would not be controversial 3 years ago in a ROCOR parish? Because I haven't actually read the book, but it doesn't seem to me that it's any particularly controversial thing to say baptism is the norm.
I can't wait to see some of the other ROCOR bishops respond to this.
I am curious to see how it goes. And Max Carvalho says, just arrived. Have you read the whole letter? We literally read it live on the screen. I do apologize. I heard that St. John of Shanghai was a true Orthodox. Cap or no cap? I really am not a fan of this cap term, but I would say that it is no cap, however, with qualification. It is important to remember that the current narrative that most people understand about true Orthodoxy, that they're kind of these isolated nobodies that existed in the middle of nowhere, isn't based in reality. The reality was, when the True Orthodox Church of Greece formed, they had help from the ROCOR, they had help from Serbia, they had help from Jerusalem, they had help from different places. Up until the 70s, True Orthodox Greek clergy were still celebrating in altars in Jerusalem. So and they continued with communion with Patriarch Theodorus until 1992 or something like that. I forget when, but very shortly before his death. So it's important to remember that true Orthodoxy, as we understood it, was a much more substantial part, or I should say, was in communion with a much more substantial part of World Orthodoxy, because some people were playing sides. But in any case, so I would say yes. I would say that he absolutely was. Because he was he held to the basics of being against ecumenism and against modernism, and there's a lot of things there. So that's what I would say. And then how could true Orthodox serve in Jerusalem in the 70s when Jerusalem was in communion with World Orthodox at large? Well, this is where it gets complicated, because you have to understand that the Church of Greece and the Greek Archdiocese in America were two very different things. One of them is basically just an arm of Constantinople. The other one was the Church of Greece was going through chaos even after the true Orthodox separated from it. So there were people in the 1970s. I remember reading one meeting where the newly elected Archbishop of Athens says, "As we know, the synod before us and this particular meeting are completely uncanonical." So they had real problems among the new calendarists in Greece, and the true Orthodox, the old calendarists, could simply, that you had to get permission from the Patriarch of Jerusalem to serve, and they would get permission regularly. So it wasn't a shock. It was just, they were going to Jerusalem. True Orthodox go to Jerusalem now. They organize annual pilgrimages. Some thoughts on early 1900s patriarchs being confirmed Freemasons. I, for one, do not have any thoughts on this. I will say why. Freemasonry is a secret society. As much as some people who did massive damage to the church, like Meletios Metaxakis, did in 1920, and he was a confirmed Freemason, the simple reality is that some of those early confirmed Freemasons didn't do anything. So his problem was that he introduced his Masonic ecumenism into the church, not so much that he was a member of it, because it's a secret society. If you find out later, you'd have to note that on his memorial, etc., because that's problematic. But if nobody knew, I mean, what could you say? I don't know that there is anything you could say. And let me see here. Max says, maybe one could argue that Archbishop Peter and Father Heers' positions aren't that different. The Archbishop doesn't even entirely discard corrective baptisms. I would argue that that's actually correct. If we look at the letter, and if we look specifically at that point 3 one more time, one thing that he says is, this is why I ask you to seek my blessing when you feel someone should be chrismated rather than baptized, or when a second and third marriage seems good for you for the salvation of those involved. Keep in mind, that position is a traditional position, which is why it is impossible for me to understand why he would be condemning Father Peter's book to begin with, because Father Peter's book isn't really talking about him. It's talking about people in the Antiochian Archdiocese. It's talking about people in the Greek Archdiocese. It's talking about people in the OCA. It has nothing to do with Archbishop Peter. That's the part that blows my mind. He dislikes his book, but the book agrees with him. He's using baptism as the norm. So that's itself really, really, really strange. But yeah, I agree. I would have put your thing on the screen. For those wondering why I'm not putting things on the stream again, StreamYard, for some reason, stopped seeing new comments that I could add to the screen somewhere around 8 o'clock. It's 8:15. And so anything after 8:17, I can't put up on the screen. It's not that I'm trying to hide any comments. I always keep full recordings, so you all know that I did respond and I am reaching out. And again, please, anyone who wants to call in, that big blue box on the top of the chat, feel free. And we could, if you want to argue or even discuss or anything like that, all up to you. But, it's, except for clergy who are under Archbishop Peter who are told to stay off the internet. You can't do that. You're not allowed. Sorry. I'm kidding. I don't care if you call. Anyway, so that's the letter, and it's causing. Okay, no, wait, somebody popped up. Hold up! Isn't Mogila's catechism ratified by a universally accepted of Jerusalem? If so, then wouldn't that disprove the pro-baptizing converts' position? No, as Craig Trulia has pointed out, as we have pointed out multiple times, the Mogila Catechism was submitted to the Synod. It had corrections, and the recognition of heterodox baptism was in those corrections. The approved catechism does not say that. So no, that doesn't help. And Mogila also, I should say St. Peter Mogila also submitted to the judgment of the Synod, as should anyone protesting about baptizing converts. So anyway, no problem. No problem, Thomas. He said, okay. Oh, okay. Thanks. MB. All right. Me boy. I don't know what MB is.
My bad.
My bad. Okay. Sorry. I'm still getting hip with the lingo, fellow kids.
Don't worry. So am I. And I'm one of the kids.
Yeah. Well, in any case, again, if we have questions, comments, angry comments, want to call me a heretic or something, all right. And Max says MB equals my bad. No cap, Father Deacon. I'm just Father now as of August 4th. I understand. I'm okay with it. People don't know, and that's cool. I was ordained in a painfully long service on August 4th to the priesthood.
If you want to see a picture of that, it's on the Discord. You can see him dying.
Okay. American Monarchist asks, if not by TO, is it better to stay in World Orthodoxy? No, that's not the tradition. Father John, who actually came up, and was disagreeing with me in the comments earlier, you go to his website, stjonah.org. The tradition, if you don't have a true church near you, is to start doing services by yourself. Do Typica. And all those services and all the liturgical texts you could possibly want are on stjonah.org. Go over there. They're great services. They're the Jordanville texts. Everyone kind of uses, even if some jurisdictions have their individual deviations, almost everything looks mostly like the Jordanville text anyway. So it's the best text out there. Let's just not lie when it comes to Eastern, right? It is the best text. Okay. And so, yeah, thank you for that, Max. He said, Axios, congratulations. Thomas Comerford said 100% Elijah. Thomas Comerford, but I think these events have important lessons to draw from when these controversies happen. Absolutely, but we have to get the lessons right. And that's why Father Peter's book is, I really want the book now. If someone wants to buy me the book, I'll take it. Because it sounds to me like it was just a really good reference text. And that's what made people angry, because it was a reference text. And if there's one thing that, I hate to say this, but modernist jurisdictions don't like, it's high information people. So the lower information they can keep people, the better. And so, yeah, that's kind of where that stands. So again, I would refer to a link on the letter itself. But I think most people have already seen it, and it doesn't actually have a link. Someone just took pictures of it. According to some Greek archdiocese priest, who I assume is part of the conspiracy to remove Father Peter, he said it was off of Discord. And why I say that is because he spent the entire day completely going off on Father Peter. I've seen people refer to Father Peter as demonic. That's like horrifying. Like that, I'm like, wow, that's just twisted. I haven't seen anything like this. It's definitely beyond anything I've seen. Again, it is an open forum and open discussion. You can always just go to the blue section in the chat and click and call in, and we'll be glad to have you. Okay. So yeah, other than that, I noticed something funny now that I'm seeing this, Aaron. I am noticing that it says picture-in-picture layout, but that hasn't been on the screen for a while. Let me see if that's going to help restart this thing. The one thing I don't want to do is I don't want to cause the stream to break. So I'm trying to do things correctly and as well as I could.
It's Streamlabs. It's going to break.
Yeah. Well, no, this is StreamYard.
Okay.
Streamlabs is more expensive, actually. If I upgraded to paid StreamYard, I don't know. American Monarchist asks, have you read The Possessed by Dostoevsky? I have not. And so I read a few things. No, Reader John says your StreamYard is being hacked by the MP. I sincerely doubt that. Let me see. Lermac16 says, Theoria, Ben Cabe, says Father Peter's theology is demonic and that his book is an abomination. Yeah, well, Theoria, Ben Cabe, is also, like, interested in, pastoring the transgenders, so I don't care what he says.
I worry about people like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much you can do. It's like... No. Well, I get the impression he's heterosexual. I don't think it's because of any hidden perversion or anything.
I just worry about them on the day of judgment. It's like
everything that they've said throughout their entire lives.
Never forget, the first person to worry about on the day of judgment is ourselves.
True.
Reader John says LOL, so we continue. All right, so I guess that was the biggest news because it was the latest news, and let me see here. Give me 1 second. Just going to take a look here. And so basically, I'm going to pull out for questions. I'm going to go for another half hour. I'm hoping to get some questions, comments. Oh, wait. Stuff is starting to appear. It worked. I don't know how it worked. But let me see if I'm going to give everyone a quick shout out. And that way they can all kind of appear. Even though I have answered all these questions already, I do apologize for not putting them on the screen. Let me see here. I missed a bunch. Oh my goodness. Wow, it really didn't catch anything. So I'm going to just, as a thank you, I'm just putting up everyone who commented, even if they disagreed. We love discussion. We love, communication. It's the thing. This is a Q&A, and I operate under the impression that some Roman Catholic guy is going to just pop up, or some Protestant guy, or even some pagan guy, or so. Anyway, you have to be ready for anyone. And so I personally am more than happy. I can't imagine, so anyone who wants to pop up, feel free. I don't know why this worked so poorly. And so I am going to get everyone on because I think that's fair. Everyone likes seeing their name pop up. It's the right thing to do. And no, it's not a tasty way to do it. That's just an old commercial. Don't mind me. And so let's see here. Okay, I'll keep this one for a couple of seconds because that way people think I'm susceptible to bribery. Right now I'm probably susceptible to bribery. I'm very broke, everyone. Like abject poverty levels here. I'm still working on the whole unemployment thing, and it's not going well.
You have all of our prayers on that. That never goes well.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Well, thank you for the prayers. Prayers will help because then maybe God will intervene and
That's about the only way.
Make some bureaucrat do something. Force the bureaucrat to look at my file, switch it out, do something cool. Things like that have happened in the past, so I have total faith they can. Okay. Paul comes. The other Paul is come on. Greetings.
Hello, gentlemen.
Hey, Paul.
How's it going, Paul? Hold on. Before I have to finish these because I didn't get a chance. I'm almost done. So Reader John says, I have the book. It's essentially a reference home, exactly what I thought. Russia wouldn't have invaded Ukraine if Ukraine hadn't had a 2014 revolution. 100%. What if he joined the pro-Trinity icon Matthewites? LOL. That's fine. There's some nice people there. Why Jay Dyer hostile to you? We have a video for it now, I guess. I did finally speak to him after a 5-year no platforming. And so yeah, he did, and it didn't go well. But okay, so we were planning on having the other Paul as our main guest this week, and Bishop Enoch was actually going to be here, but as I mentioned, there's internet issues. So what is your question? What are your questions today, Paul?
Right. My first question, my second one's going to be a light one for afterwards, but my first one would probably be, given the chaos of the events around your communions and world orthodoxy and whatnot, what mechanism is there at all for feasibly any mechanism of something like an ecumenical council? Because the past ages of the church, that mechanism for solving the greatest crises of the church was through the ecumenical council, which was particularly an imperial institution. So maybe that'll factor into the answer. But is any kind of mechanism like that even possible for fixing these issues, or is it really just a rough through the mud, march through the institutions, take one diocese at a time kind of issue?
Unfortunately, you actually answered your own question almost completely.
Right.
The ecumenical councils were councils of the ecumene. They were imperial councils. Mm-hmm. We have had pan-Orthodox synods that carry the weight of an ecumenical council, such as 1672, etc. But these are not called ecumenical precisely because they're not ecumenical. They are just the church. And so
well, if I may then rephrase my question then, would such a pan-Orthodox synod be feasible for these issues, or is it the same thing, go through the diocese one by one, basically?
No, I mean, pan-Orthodox synods can be done, but they have to be pan-Orthodox synods, which means they have to be Orthodox synods. So, I mean, in theory, any group of, like let's say in the current situation we're in right now, That's something that's been discussed. For example, our Metropolitan Seraphim has actually discussed the possibility of holding a pan-Orthodox council with the Greek Synod, with our Synod. I'm sure that question's come up among other true Orthodox communions. Right. The question will be, will it be received? So let's say, even if these Orthodox are not in communion with each other, they're still going to review the text of the council to see if they're actually Orthodox, just to see if they can find heresy in the other person's position. So it is possible. But in terms of setting up something like, say, what they tried to do in 2016, which now everyone recognizes as a robber council anyway, it would probably require the use of force. Like, you would need like a strong Orthodox king somewhere. It would be like, hey guys, why don't you all just come over to our town to have a big celebration of true Orthodoxy, and then like put the machine guns on them, be like, all right, that's it, now you have to hold the council. That's basically what they did in those days, you know.
I was about to say, you're just describing the first ecumenical council.
I'm also describing the first all of them. So that process would require the return of Orthodox monarchy, which I am 100% in favor of. Want to see it. Gotta see it. All right, so let's get to more comments, because somebody said, can you ask Paul to do a Jay Dyer impression? He's good at it. Okay. I've never heard your Jay Dyer impression.
Oh,
now people are going to be like, he really hates him. Look, he made the other Paul do a Jay Dyer impression.
Yeah, can we get the TO guys out of here? Don't know why we invite them on.
That's exactly what he sounded like when he said it.
You're too good at that. You've practiced that.
That literally sounds exactly like how he said it. Oh my goodness, that's really good.
Yeah, I don't know why we allow these clowns on here. Who's the mod that did that?
Hey, what did I do, mate?
Yeah, get out of here. You're stupid. Your church is tiny.
Okay, so yeah. Well, you got your wish, South Padre Tony, and it was a very, very good impression. Dyer's a dummy followed by lie. You know, you got to give Craig. I hope for his salvation as well as for his followers. You know, but in any case, that was a really good impression. Wow. Okay, so all right, so that was the first question, which unfortunately, you're intelligent enough to have known the answer, but it was ugly. So.
Yeah, I just wanted to see if there was something else. Maybe had some secret weapon hidden under under the TO communion. But in any case, with that said, you've probably talked about it here or there elsewhere, but predictions for Nicaea 2025, particularly by communion.
I have our predictions. We've been saying them on this show for a while. This is my personal prediction. Nothing's going to happen. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to have them. They're going to do like one of the regular old ecumenical prayers. They're going to have some, some meetings. Maybe they'll have some photo ops. There will be no common cup. That's my guess. People are like waiting. They think like 2025 is the moment I'm going to leave as soon as I see the common cup. They're experienced ecumenists. They know that. And they want to keep you there. So why would they do the most provocative thing they could possibly do when their current method, which is get the kids to believe that the Roman Catholic Church and the Orthodox and the Anglicans are all one church anyway, is working just fine? Half of the people that come into these churches, the kids are basically being catechized with the idea that, oh, yeah, it's all one church anyway. And it creates that's part of the reason why a lot of them are leaving, by the way, because if everyone has the truth, then nobody does. So ultimately, that's why would they change a program that's for them is working?
About common cup, I mean, maybe, I don't know the ortho situation as well, but like looking at the perspective of the Roman communion, like it's easy in our circles to see that it's like very normal that you have not even just rad trads, but even moderate trads who would recognize problems with the common cup. But looking at the overall perspective of the state of faithful Romanists, there's a ton of liberalism and even just basic lackadaisicalism where if they'll see a common cup, they'll either not care or they'll think, hey, look, lovely, we're getting more union, we're having kumbaya again.
Right.
I don't know if I at least for the Roman side, I don't know if I'd put it out of the question.
Right. Well, I think that they might even offer it as a possibility, but I think that the Orthodox ecumenists they're well aware of what's happening now. Look at just the chaos caused by this letter. The point is they're going to take that risk. They don't want their churches to empty. What they want is to make sure that they stay as filled as possible. And this is why all these things coming out, especially the information about true Orthodoxy, is terrifying to them. But in any case,
I think you're giving them too much credit, Father. I think you're thinking that they're smarter than they actually are. I think they are.
Maybe they are that. They could be that
That's
dumb,
another one.
but that works in our favor too. I've been surprised by the level of stupidity among the world power brokers, etc., that I've seen in the past year and a year and a half. So I'm like, wow, they're really dumb. Like, and I think to myself, there must be some more better plan that they're coming up with, and they just double down on the stupid. And I'm like, okay, maybe they don't have a plan. In which
Pride
case,
before the fall.
That's good for us. That is good for us.
I would definitely not put that beyond anyone involved here having a shared community. I'm going to be, if they're going to be streaming this somewhere or even on TV, I'm going to have my eyes glued to the screen live. Even
it's
if
going to be on cable television. I don't think they're going to be able to. Maybe EWTN or something.
Yeah,
I'm
going to, even if it's like 2 a.m. in the morning and I've work in like 6 hours, I'll still have my eyes glued to the screen on that. I want to see everything as happens. Like, especially in a moment like that, if it opens up in an episode or on a day, and you suddenly see the EP and other patriarchs and the Pope, and there's this single mass, and it's like, oh dear, then you'll know. Then
I will take off work.
Yeah, I would say that would be the beginning of the end for what we call world orthodoxy. People would flee in droves. Those buildings would drop in value precipitously. True Orthodox with a lot of money would end up buying them. And this is unfortunately the process in history and how sometimes true. I created a chart. I'm going to get to the chart, but I want to get to more of the questions. The reason I am suspicious of Western Rite today is because the church has never in its history resurrected a dead rite. It seems very forceful. Being a Westerner, I don't have a problem with Eastern. And I don't have a problem with Easterners either. I think converts, when they're happy where they are, they don't have to, just because you're a Westerner doesn't mean you have to become Western Rite. I disagree with the idea that long dead rites can't be resurrected, because I know that the liturgy of St. James is a recent resurrection of a liturgy not used in Orthodoxy. But more importantly, there's signs of use in Mount Athos all the way to the 14th century. So we're not talking about a very big drop, if you know about the Amalfian Monastery. But the point is that one thing that I can say is that these are complete pre-schism Western rites. They were completely, you can find their complete documentation as before the schism. Because they're complete rites, it does not matter if they're dead. If you know how to sing the music, which we do, we know Gregorian rotation, although there's been controversy over that, and you know the wording, and you have the commons, and this is the most important part. If you have the commons, you can literally adapt that rite to present usage. That's why we have services for St. Seraphim of Sarov and St. John of Shanghai, St. Philaret in Western Rite form, because we have a commons, or what would be called the general Maneum in the East. Let me see. Dyer and Elk never seem to let everyone talk except Tio. Interesting. Never saw anyone shut down so fast. Well, I'm not surprised. I got married to a Funko Pop is a Jay Dyer banger. I don't know what that means. I think you're supposed to say that or something.
It's there's this other Christian, I think ortho convert YouTuber. I think he's going ortho, Christian Mario, and he made this absolutely hilarious. He's made a couple of them, but this one particular hilarious video about egalitarians, like in the Protestant world with egalitarians who are like pro women's ordination and that. He's made a diss track about him. It was the funniest thing ever.
I'll look for it. I will look for. I got married to a Funko Pop after our discussion.
I can send you the link. It's not called that, but that's one of the lines.
All right, and then we have Thomas Comfort said, "Do they have that canon from 861 Constantinople vouching for them? It's crazy how specific that canon is." And Nicodemus's interpretation. Yeah, that's this first second synod. It's so bad they tell people not to read the rhetoric. That's the canon I brought up in my debate. Yeah, it's the single solution that has worked through every heresy in history. And so we get to no communion yet, but I think they'll have a shared day for Easter. That very real possibility. Now keep in mind that if they switch to the date for Easter and even marginally recognize the Pope, we are fully justified in just referring to them as uniates, because that's exactly what they are. And if they do that, that's still a winner. They're trying that in Ukraine. They've already talked about having the shared revised Julian calendar, which is a train wreck of a calendar because it uses two of them and combines them, thus breaking the liturgical unity of the year. So are those in World Orthodoxy lost? I don't think so. I think that I don't believe anyone's lost until they die.
I hope not, because I'm in it.
Yeah, what you want is to take the opportunity you can to find a true bishop, and sometimes that takes some sifting and it takes some work. I try to make it easier. If you go to my Gab, I have a list of true Orthodox churches. You can use that and try to see what's close to you, that sort of thing. So I don't believe anyone's lost until they're lost. Pope of the Future rivals Funko Pop song. Okay, I will remember that one too. And okay, I see. Oh, you sent me the egalitarian theme song. I will look at that after the show. Elijah Hallberg, what was the Ineoslavia controversy in your TO communion? Okay, what is Ineoslavia? That was, it's mostly dead now, and I'm going to explain. Basically, Ineoslavia was the heresy believing that the name of God is actually God. So, just the name Jesus Christ was actually saying the name Jesus Christ was literally invoking God. You're literally kind of saying God. In its most extreme form, it leads to almost a sort of what's the word, pantheism. But the point is, and there are some Ineoslavists who do in Russia who do think like that, but they're actually very rare. What we're seeing is closer to what was known as the Luriite version of Ineoslavia, which was the really more in-churched version, where they still believed that stuff, but they kind of referred to the name of God as similar to an icon. So it represents grace, which is close, but then they still say the name of God is God. And so basically, what ended up happening was, as I mentioned, this was started by this Gregory Laurier, who eventually would get deposed by the Synod of the ROAC in 2005. Yeah, 2005. And I was there for that synod in Russia when that happened. And so they deposed him. They removed him for his false teaching. But, he found 2 deposed bishops and got them to make him a bishop and declared himself the new alternate ROAC with his Ineoslavia heresy. Since then, he had been working his machinations. He had already had some relationship with Hakna. And so he decided to push those buttons. And what ended up happening was ultimately the leaders in Hakna split. And basically the ones that supported Laurier kind of are the remainder of Hakna, and they kind of reduced, and the original ones that were involved died. But Hakna doesn't talk as much about Ineoslavia anymore. In our communion, Laurier got to reach out to Metropolitan Raphael and tried to convince him of this. We actually broke the communion between our churches for about 2 years until finally Metropolitan Raphael realized this was a mistake. This is not a good belief. It's not Orthodox. And they dropped it. We all returned to communion with each other. And so I'm starting to think of like Ineoslavia in terms of a heresy as like a really bad cold. It like affects synods, and then kind of they wake up one day and they're like, wait, we don't really believe this. And then by then the damage has been done, so on and so forth. But then they wake up and they get better. So hopefully even Hakna will recover from that. Let me see. Liturgy of St. James fell out of general usage and was brought back in some places. Also, Metropolitan Seraphim in Greece resurrects the Liturgy of Serapion from Egypt. Hasn't been used for more than 1,000 years. I don't even know what the Liturgy of Serapion is. Okay, I think that's a great point for Western, right? Thoughts on Oriental Orthodox being allowed in St. Vladimir Seminary. St. Vladimir has graduated Oriental Orthodox to become Oriental Orthodox priest. SVS Press also sells Coptic literature. Well, obviously, I think it's terrible. I've seen it. I've seen it both at St. Vladimir's and St. Tikhon's. I haven't seen it at St. Vladimir's. I knew about it in St. Vladimir's. I've seen it at St. Tikhon's because I am not that far from them. And the few times I visited, there were Monophysites there. It's that's unfortunate. That's ecumenistic, but it's the OCA, so it's not surprising. In that sense, I don't know what to say to that. It's they do. It's unfortunate, and I hope that stops. But it's probably not going to, because as I mentioned, people seem to think that ecumenism in World Orthodoxy is strategic. It's not. It's a belief system. it's a belief in the idea of ultimately the branch theory, the multiple churches having the faith, etc. And so, yeah, that's not going to change, unfortunately. They even let Oriental Orthodox bishops speak at graduation. Well, that says it all, doesn't it?
That's still less bad than what they were saying before, where they were trying to say that the Jews had a path to life through Judaism.
Oh yeah, well, the Subdeacon Benjamin from the ROCOR-MP he brought that up, and they it started going viral, and they immediately were like, pull that section, get it out, and they are actually afraid of they're afraid of potential losses, etc. These things do affect them. I vote with your feet is the best way I can say it.
I was gonna actually ask one last question, or one other last question before I head off, but you pretty much answered it straight away. It was gonna be, even if they don't end up sharing the cup, or perhaps even for the present, even if they don't share the cup, do you see nonetheless World Orthodoxy, Rome, and perhaps others suddenly, without saying explicitly, but otherwise adopting a quote unquote Protestant type of ecclesiology, but you kind of answered already by saying branch theory, basically.
Well, yeah, but now I want to I'd like to extrapolate this a little further. And what I mean by that is, let's look at this in the future. Let's say that, because Rome's understanding of ecumenism is very different from, it's not very different, it's sort of different from, say, the Protestant and the Orthodox versions. Rome's is everyone can be united together as they are, as long as they're with Rome. Whereas everyone else, it doesn't matter Rome or not. So what I think we'll see is a slow passing over time where the papacy is kind of heading this kind of ecumenistic, syncretistic organization. The Orthodox ecumenists will eventually join it. The Protestant ecumenists will eventually join it. But what's going to happen in the meantime is that other bodies are going to start to take their place, like the True Orthodox or like the ACNA you've mentioned, so on and so forth, among the Anglicans. The problem is that can't happen with Rome, which means Rome will just start collapsing on itself further, because as this weakened body goes down, unless there's like some war and they do like a whole investiture controversy again with that, I have no idea, but all right. Reader Johnson, isn't that Hilarion of Budapest's favorite heresy, aka Alfiev? He's brought it up in text. He seems to like it, but I think he just thinks it's, I don't know his theology very well, but it seems that he just likes trends, and he thought that was a trend.
I'll catch you again next week, I assume.
No problem. We'll see you next week, Paul. Thank you so much for being on.
No problem.
Thanks for the link.
Can't wait for this topic discussion.
All right. Have a good night. All right. So I've seen priests give Eucharist to Copts. If you believe they're part of the church, you would do that.
I think the Antiochians have an agreement with them, if I'm not mistaken.
They do. It's the 1991 agreement, and that's for concelebration in cases of like weddings, funerals. They have concelebration rules in place. Alexandria has a similar set of rules, so I don't want to just pick on Antioch because it's not fair. And then let me see. Thomistic Monster wrote, "Thanks for jumping on, Paul. You've become one of my favorite heretics." Yeah, I'd say he's a pretty funny guy. Fellowship, St. Moses the Black, and World Orthodoxy pushes racial reconciliation in the church. What is racial reconciliation? Like, how do you do that? I don't even know what that means. It's just you go to church, you receive, any race can be reconciled to the church. It's called, repenting and becoming Orthodox. I don't understand what else that is. Thanks at the other Paul. Yes, we agree. It's always great to have him. We are now hitting a minute and an hour and 30. Did you have any questions or comments right now, Aren?
I did have one question that I wanted to ask.
Sure.
I was hoping Vladica would be here just in case you didn't know the answer, but I'll ask you.
Okay, if I don't know the answer, I'll just say it. I've done it here before. Even
I
on
know.
The stream.
But no, when I was in class the other day, we were at the church, and I was staring at the baptismal icon of Christ, and I noticed that the Holy Spirit, when it comes down, it doesn't have the Oon in its halo, while Christ does. Is there any writings by the fathers or anything of why Christ specifically is the only one that actually has that in his halo, while the Holy Spirit in that case doesn't.
I would have to look at a text of iconography and get more information. I can guess, but the most likely guess is because the Oon as is the spoken form of the name of God, and
Right.
as humans have not heard that form until Christ in any normal sense, he would be the one that gets it because of his incarnation.
Okay.
So that seems to be the most obvious. But again, I am not an iconographer. I will ask an iconographer.
If you could, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I can do that. And I can send you that answer. Later on this week.
Just shoot it over to Gab or whatever.
All right,
you have my information.
Yes, I do. All right. And so, all right. So if that was your question, we're gonna open the floor up one more time. See if anyone wants to pop in. Yell at me, so on and so forth, if I've screwed up something. But okay, hold on. We'll be right back. And if not, we're going to go maybe another 10 minutes, and then we're going to let go. This has been a great show. A lot going on. It's unfortunate that it's under this circumstance. Again, I feel terrible for Father Peter. What they're doing is unfair, but we know why they're doing it. And the point is, for me, it encourages us to push harder, if not because of the fact that this is just such an injustice, if only because that I can imagine Father Peter cannot feel great right now. He's trying to help people, and unfortunately, they're not listening, and that's an awful shame. And it's also a shame it's gone up to this level. It surprises me. It's something I'm not used to. Something we're definitely going to put on NFTU on the website because of that. And there was a comment, Father Paul. Okay, it was an issue with the Pharisees. Christ said that before Abraham he is. Therefore, the Owen is indicative of that. Yes. Okay. Yes. What happened is I don't know if you were at the beginning of the stream, but this letter of Archbishop Peter of Chicago, there's not really a link to it. I can link to my Gab account because I put a copy there, but it was sent as a picture. Basically changes up a whole bunch of things about it changes up a whole bunch of attitudes towards the people. It's people are calling it like basically the first real condemnation of Father Peter, which is horrible. Apparently, they're accusing him of basically accusing him of creating a parachurch in his diocese. I have put a link there if you want to click it. You can read it if you hadn't, or if you want to just wait till the end of the stream, which would be in about 8 minutes, and then we'll, you can always just replay it because I do read the whole letter out with my own opinions because, frankly, to me it's awful, and I think it's wrong. And so let me see here. That's just my link. So again, this is I feel like everything, and I said this on my Twitter, I'm more convinced than ever that everything works in God's time. That doesn't always mean that things are going to work the way I want. It's the way God wants, but that everything works out the way it's supposed to. And I'm not sure how that's going to relate to Father Peter. I have no idea. But I feel confident that if he is serious about, the solidity of the faith, and he seems that way considering the stuff he's written, and he's not just acting as a gatekeeper to keep people from leaving for true Orthodox, then yeah, I think God will hear his intention, and I think God willing, that'll make things easier for him, and there will be a peaceful resolution that is to everyone's benefit. So we'll see. And so that's that's really all we have today. This was actually a pretty interesting show. We had the discussion on the letter. We had the other Paul on, which was kind of awesome. We had Aren with questions and comments, and we had a lot of comments from everybody, even Father John Whiteford, which I wasn't expecting. And that's actually nice. I still disagree, and I'm going to disagree on the whole marriage thing because I think that for lack of a better word, in practical history of the church has de-recognized and recognized marriages. Again, maybe I can be proven wrong here. I might be wrong. In that case, it wouldn't affect me personally because my bishop already said he did not recognize. Because it does come up. I had a civil marriage and children, and I still talk to those children, and one of them is living here in my neighborhood and lived with me. But having reviewed as much of the canonical literature as I could on the matter, including grounds for divorce and whether or not marriages are recognized or not, I would say that the church decides whether or not something is a marriage, and in my case, it has been consistently found that it's not. The first was not, including my attempts to get it regularized. Is this what the "Everything Is Not Okay" update was about? Hope all is well. No, that was definitely it was about money and other issues. It wasn't about the Father Peter thing. I didn't know about the Father Peter thing until today. I got that 11 hours in, and I wouldn't have spotted it if it wasn't for all the places that kind of put it around, and I kind of diversify where I am. Because that guy actually, the sober deacon guy who put it up, blocked me on Twitter. I would never have seen it. So it was just a stroke of fortune that, hey, I got this. I'm like, this is news. This is a subject. And then I tried to call the bishops, and I found out the internet was having problems. So I was like, okay, but this is still good enough for me to do myself. All right. So yeah, that's really what it comes down to. It's just a really tricky time. I talked a little bit earlier about in the show about it because I was asked about this earlier. But I don't want to get into much detail about it. But also, when I wrote that, there were fewer solutions available. There's issues with my car, and thank God, God willing, there's a possible solution, which should make life a lot easier and less stressful. So everything is better, even if it is not okay. So again, we're going into the last 3.5 minutes here. If we got any final questions, comments, etc., feel free to feel free to put them on. If you want to jump on and say hi, you're fully welcome to. And we're going to keep going until the very end. I'm not going to play any classical music for you. I don't know if that was ever really popular or just an excuse for me to be late. But okay, let me see here. And I'm just going to finish up by noting, if I can pull that up, again, by noting, that, let me see here, that, again, we've been doing this since 2004, reporting on global events related to true orthodoxy, as well as underreported events related to the greatest heresy of our age, ecumenism, a global web of interreligious syncretism in which the hierarchy of world orthodoxy is now inextricably enmeshed. When we began this page, we never thought we'd be in the middle of a global war for the salvation of souls. But things never work out the way that we plan, and I'm going full-time to expose ecumenical heresy where it can be found, help Orthodox Christians find their way home, and do our part to stop the globalists from fulfilling their plans of one world religion, the religion of Antichrist. Today, we need your help. Subscribe and support us at nftu.net. You can use Buy Me a Coffee. Subscribe on Odyssey. And you can also donate on nftu.net via different payment methods, whether it's Scab Pay, PayPal, Buy Me a Coffee, or even crypto. But keep watching. We're just getting started, and things keep getting more interesting. And Aren ends with a comment, and we're going to close off here. The more they do stuff like this to Father Peter, the harder it will make all these new young men to not stay and join TO. And I also don't think the bishops realize how many priests will leave if they keep pushing. That's foreboding. Probably true, but foreboding. But again, we're not mind readers here. We do the news and follow it where it goes. Everyone, thank you for listening. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your disagreements. Thank you for showing up. If you showed up on the screen, especially other Paul and Aren, thank you so much for everything you guys do. We're here at your service. Take care. Good night, and God bless.